Hey, everybody, what is going on out there in podcast land? It is time for the latest, greatest episode of The Fortress of Rock, episode 148, here Friday night, June the 14th, 2024. I am your host, as always, the Maestro, Kevin Crane. As always, very appreciative, very happy to have you aboard for this rock and roll roller coaster ride. And you know what we start off with each and every Friday night. Segment one is News of the World, our tribute to the late, great Freddie Mercury and Queen. And we have got a lot, not only here, but in segment two and breakdown. Going to take up a lot of our time, so let us get into it. Are you unhappy with your choices for president? You don't like Donald Trump? You don't like Joe Biden? Who could really blame you? Well, you have a new choice. You have a new choice. And that would be Alice Cooper. Alice Cooper has officially launched as a member of the Wild Party his candidacy for President of the United States. His slogan, a troubled man for troubled times. And there's actually a website out there, aliceforpresident.com. And I got to tell you, given the choices that we have, Alice Cooper might not be the worst selection we could make in November. Now, in terms of new music, got some really, really cool new music news for you. The Offspring are back. They have got a new album coming out October the 11th called Supercharged. And the first single, Make It All Right, is out now. Also, somebody who I really, really love, respect, admire. This guy is nonstop. If he's not working with Slash, if he's not working with Alter Bridge, he is doing solo material, which is the case here. And that is, of course, the great Myles Kennedy. Myles Kennedy has a new album coming out same day as The Offspring, October the 11th. The album is called The Art of Letting Go, and the phenomenal hard rockin' first single is Say What You Will. So again, Myles Kennedy out October the 11th with The Art of Letting Go. Then I thought I was going to be breaking big news, big new music news, but it only lasted for about 2 days. And with the way we tape, the surprise is gone. I really loved the marketing behind this one. Def Leppard had set up a hotline, phone numbers in the US and in Europe, where you could call in and get a really short lo-fi version, a snippet of their brand new song, Just Like 73. But it only lasted, like I said, 2 days, because now the official full-length version is out on all the streaming services. But I thought it was really cool. I actually called 1-818-286-4006 and listened to that short 10-15 second snippet of Just Like 73 over the phone. Gotta love that. I just wish they would have held on to that maybe another week. But in this day and age, alas and alack, that kind of creativity does not last for long. So now you can get out there and listen to Just Like 73 from Def Leppard featuring Tom Morello on your favorite streaming service. But I would still encourage you, once again, call 1-818 286 4006 if you want to have some old school fun. Now, I will call out. I'm going to get a little angry here, going to get a little upset here. But we've mentioned this story a week or two ago. And I do not like artists and performers who try to deceive and try to dupe us as fans. And I have to say, I think the Black Keys are definitely trying to make us all look like fools. Now, of course, we talked about the fact that they had to cancel their entire arena tour, the International Players Tour, because if you looked at posts, people showing how many tickets, how many seats were available, it was an abject failure. But of course, the Black Keys will never take blame for this, so they split, quote unquote. They split with their management team. Of course, that's Full Stop Management, which features the legendary Irving Azoff, along with Steve Moore. Could I see that maybe they overstepped their bounds when it comes to ticket prices? Of course. Right now, what band isn't? What performer isn't? But maybe the backlash is finally settling in, where fans are saying enough is enough. If you're not Taylor Swift, if you're not the Rolling Stones, if you're not AC/DC, you're not going to get away with charging $100 for nosebleed seats. And that's exactly what the Black Keys were doing. And I have never been a fan. So this is where I'm going to get a little nasty here. I think these two are jerks. Carney and Auerbach are jerks. Everything I've seen about them in the media, everything I've seen about them in the press, they are standoffish, they're nasty, they're awful, they're terrible, terrible people who think they're entitled to the success that they think they've achieved. And this ties into my hatred for Rolling Stone and the rock and roll press in general. Because the Black Keys are not that good. They're just not. The new album has not sold well. And now this fake cancellation of their arena dates because they swear, oh, well, we went overseas and we saw how much better things worked in a closer, more tight-knit, intimate environment. So that's what we want to do in America. No, that's BS. You couldn't sell tickets, especially $100 minimum. Be honest, be fair, be upfront. But these guys cannot. Carney and Auerbach are jerks beyond belief. And again, I'm trying to keep the Fortress of Rock family friendly, so I will not use the language I would like to use describing these two pretentious jerkwads. They think they are the second coming of rock and roll gods, and they are not. And I think their ego finally caught up with them with this latest tour and this debacle. And they're blaming their management team. They're blaming everybody but themselves. How about you be a bit more humble? How about you're a little bit more, I don't know, mature in how you handle things? Yes, they'll have more money than I will ever see in my life, but at least I can say I have done everything in my life with some dignity. And the Black Keys cannot say that. This is an embarrassment for them. And it's a shame that their fans, the ones that are out there, again, I don't think there's a ton. At least I don't think there's as many as they think they have. It's a shame for them, but maybe it's better for them. They will be able to get, hopefully, cheaper seats closer to the band. Now, we all know how much I hate the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, but we recently had the Songwriters Hall of Fame, and REM got into the Songwriters Hall of Fame, and it was kind of interesting and cool that for the first time since 2007, all four original members of REM performed together. They only played one song, Losing My Religion, of course, but kind of a really, really cool rock and roll moment for you kids. And then we have a moment of silence, kind of tying into songwriting. Mark James. Now you might be going, who's that? Maestro, who is that? We never really acknowledge fairly the people behind the scenes who write all the great songs. We only remember the performers, the performances, the artists. But Mark James wrote unbelievably huge hits like Suspicious Minds, Always on My Mind, and Hooked on a Feeling. So, of course, we send out our thoughts and prayers to the family and friends of Mark James and the impact that he has had on music and rock and roll. All right, now my little bit of Van Halen news for the week. You knew I could not get through an entire episode without talking about Van Halen. Controversy. Who's at fault? Who's to blame? Typical Van Halen stuff. We talked a few months back about how their final album with the three Van Halens, Alex, Wolfgang, and Eddie, along with David Lee Roth, a vastly underrated album, in my opinion, A Different Kind of Truth, was not available on streaming services in the United States. And of course, trash talking, going back and forth. Who's to blame? Who's at fault? Wolfgang blaming, in no uncertain terms, David Lee Roth. Well, something happened because now the underrated Van Halen final album, A Different Kind of Truth, is now available on streaming services across the United States. And if you have never listened to this album, shame on you. It is a great, a fitting swan song, even though we didn't know it at the time that it was going to be the last Van Halen album. I have no problem with this being the final Van Halen album. Now, we've got Bon Jovi coming up in segment 2. We are going to review the brand new album, Forever. And if you've been listening over the last 3 or 4 months to the Fortress of Rock, you know I have my problems. I have my issues with John Bon Jovi for multiple reasons, but specifically because back in 2022, I saw Bon Jovi live in concert for the first time, and it was miserable, horrible. I have seen over 300 concerts in my life, and this was the worst I had ever seen. And then in the Bon Jovi documentary on Hulu right now, he admits it. He admits he is not in any way, shape, or form ready to go out on the road and sing night in, night out. But now he finally says, okay, even though I was able to put together an album, he is unlikely to tour behind the new album forever because, of course, he is still recovering from vocal cord surgery. And that's fine. I still don't think he should have ever gone out on tour in 2022, knowing he was never, ever, ever going to be able to put out any semblance of a decent performance. He stole money from his fans. But, last Friday night, June the 7th, nobody ever said he couldn't do a short set to promote the new release of Forever at his own bar and restaurant. So, of course, Bon Jovi performed a surprise 5-song set at JBJ's in Nashville last Friday night. But, that's it. Can't do any more than that. Can't do any more than that. And eventually we'll get to the point where I do watch the entire long ass documentary on Hulu about Bon Jovi. And I admit I'm biased, I'm prejudiced against this because I think he's done a grave disservice to his fans, stealing their money when he knew he could not sing. So, tour news, of course, always a big part here of our first segment. Most of this is very, I will say, off the wall. For instance, Paul McCartney has announced new tour dates, but don't get too excited unless you live in South America. Paul McCartney has announced 5 shows in October in South America. Same goes for Sammy Hagar in terms of a very limited announcement. We all know he's out on the road this summer. We'll, of course, have a review for you with the Best of All Worlds tour. Joe Satriani learning Eddie Van Halen's guitar parts. This is the closest we're ever going to get to a Van Halen tribute. But Sammy Hagar, of course, is legendary for his birthday bash. It usually just takes place in Cabo San Lucas in Mexico. But this year he's expanding it out to America. So Sammy Hagar's 2024 birthday bash will take place in Las Vegas, October the 4th and October the 5th. And then, of course, he'll head down to Cabo, to the great and glorious Cabo Wabo, October the 11th and October the 13th. Now, we mentioned Miles Kennedy with a new album coming out October the 11th. Already announced Miles Kennedy's solo tour in North America in 2025, January and February, 22 dates, just announced. Tickets are on sale now. Now, I don't know what this means for the future of Alter Bridge, but Miles Kennedy, one thing I can say about Miles Kennedy is he will not stand still. He will always be making music, whether it's with Alter Bridge, whether it's with Slash and the Conspirators, or whether it's on his own. He is, along with Dave Grohl of the Foo Fighters, one of the most dynamic creative forces that we've got left here in rock and roll. We got more Priest dates. Judas Priest and Sabaton. 25 new North American fall tour dates running through September and October. And they are still at the top of their game. Referencing, of course, Judas Priest. I still think Invincible Shield could end up being one of my top 2 or 3 albums of the year. I know we're only halfway through the year, but still unbelievably impressive. And then, of course, I just saw them live here recently, reviewed it for you here on the Fortress of Rock. They are phenomenal still to this day. Check out Judas Priest live, especially if you have never seen them live. But diehard fans know, of course, they bring it each and every night. Then finally, for the rich and the wealthy, which I guess we could say applies to most concert goers nowadays, unless you want to sit up in the nosebleeds like I do with my friends. If you want to head out to Las Vegas, the latest official Sphere show. Now, we addressed the rumors a couple months ago, but it's now completely 100% official that the Eagles will be playing the Las Vegas Sphere. 8 shows over 4 weekends, starting September the 20th, wrapping up October the 19th. Make sure before you book everything, flights, tickets, hotel, you get all your ducks in a row. The initial rumors, they had it set for a little bit longer of a residency for the Eagles, so keep that in mind. So again, September 20th through October the 19th, but it's 8 shows over 4 weekends for the Eagles at the Sphere. And that is going to do it for News of the World. Segment 1 is over and done. But we are not even close to being done here on the Fortress of Rock. We have got a jam-packed segment 2 breakdown. Will feature our latest concert review, Styx, Foreigner, and John Waite live in Grand Rapids, Michigan on the opening night of the Jukebox Heroes and Renegades tour. We also have our review of the new Bon Jovi album, Forever, along with a couple new song reviews for you. So you do not want to go anywhere. I know it's Friday night, you do want to go somewhere, but why bother? Why spend all that money at the bars, eating at a fancy restaurant, when it's free to just listen to me talking about the music that we know and love? So segment 1 of the Fortress of Rock is done. Breakdown coming up after a quick, cheesy musical interlude. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Fortress of Rock, segment 2 here on June the 14th, 2024. I am the Maestro, Kevin Crane. You are who you are. This is episode 148. And we have got a jam-packed breakdown segment. Breakdown, of course, our tribute to the late, great Tom Petty, along with his band, the Heartbreakers. And we'll talk a little bit more about Mike Campbell, former member of the Heartbreakers, a little bit later on in the show. But we have got a ton to discuss, so let's get into it. We'll start off with our featured concert review of the week. And then we'll get into our featured album review of the week. But I was fortunate enough to watch opening night in person up in Grand Rapids, Michigan, the Van Andel Arena, opening night of the tour, Jukebox Heroes and Renegades tour, featuring Styx, Foreigner, and John Waite. Very solid show, beginning to end. There's no way you could tell this was an opening night. And you really wouldn't figure there would be a lot of hiccups or problems, especially when you're considering it's Styx, it's Foreigner. These bands have been on the road nonstop for the most part for how many decades? 4, 5 decades? Now, John Waite, maybe a little bit of a wild card in that I'd never seen him before. Maybe a glitch at the beginning when the spotlight didn't turn on for the first 20, 30 seconds on him as he was playing the first song in his set. But hard to be if you are a classic rock fan, hard to be disappointed in this show. Now, a couple observations. I'll admit, and I always admit my bias. I will always admit my bias. I was biased. I was there for Styx. I have seen Foreigner. This will be the third time in the last 5 years, 4 or 5 years. And it gets to be a little bit redundant. Now, I'm not one of those people. I don't have a problem with the fact that it's not the original lineup. There are no original members left. I get that. Mick Jones has signed off on this version of Foreigner. Kelly Hansen is a ridiculously awesome frontman, lead singer. Of course, Jeff Pilson, the great classic Dokken bass player, has been with Foreigner for a couple decades now. This Foreigner band, you can call them a cover band, and I'm sure there are people out there that will, and I won't dispute you on that. You'll never get me to fight you on that because I don't have a horse in the race. I don't know how I can dispute you. You'd be absolutely right in saying you've got no original members. How can you call this Foreigner? It doesn't matter if they've signed off on it. It's still not Foreigner. But they're still damn enjoyable. And they play every hit with passion. They're tight, musically, vocally. I have learned to accept this version of Foreigner as the current version of Foreigner, even though normally I'd probably be a little more picky about it. I would probably say, well, this band really doesn't have any music behind them in terms of new albums, new material that really substantiates them as being anything more than a cover band. So maybe I'm being a hypocrite, but I still love this final version of Foreigner because, of course, this is the farewell tour for Foreigner. Now we all know what that means. That's open-ended. So we'll see when Foreigner actually truly plays their final show. Now, I'm sorry, going back to John Waite. Of course, John Waite, kind of a journeyman rock and roller, but found a lot of success in multiple groups along with his solo material. I was happy to see that he relied more in his set on his older music with the Babies. He did play his big hit from his time with Bad English, When I See You Smile, and I think I might have nodded off for a minute or two. Just kidding. No. Then, of course, he played his big solo hit, Missing You. But I was very, very happy that he played 4 songs from his time with the Babies. And then he closed out with a very solid rendition of Led Zeppelin, doing a Led Zeppelin cover. So I enjoyed John Waite. I thought very, very good 40-minute set from him. Then Foreigner played for about an hour and 15 minutes. In particular, I guess if I had to pick a song from their set, I always love Dirty White Boy. Maybe because it's a guilty pleasure I can't understand. My friend tells me, a friend that I go with to all these concerts, always says, how is this song not canceled? Every time they play it, everybody in the crowd, and this was a sold-out arena up in Grand Rapids, everybody's screaming, Dirty White Boy! You would think the PC cancel culture would have somehow beaten Foreigner down by now and told them, you can't play that song. But they still do, and it's still awesome. And then we get the Styx, as I mentioned, Biased. Even though Foreigner, this is the one thing I really wanted to bring up, Foreigner seemed to energize the crowd the most of the 3 performers, the 3 acts. The crowd seemed to really be more into Foreigner, which is interesting because Tommy Shaw of Styx has claimed, or in the past claimed, residence for a long, long time in Michigan. So you would have thought you would have had a little bit of that hometown hero thing going. But I personally lean more towards Styx. I just find that their music is a little more diverse, a little bit more different than the Foreigner. As much as I love Foreigner, it can wear on you. It does have a little bit of sameness about it after a while. But Styx, you go from the opener, The Grand Illusion, and they did an unbelievable, ridiculous version of Come Sail Away. To me, that's when the energy for the entire show was at its peak, was during Come Sail Away. You covered all the basics with Blue Collar Man, Too Much Time on My Hands. Some people probably didn't like the fact that they snuck in a new song, a relatively new song, the title track from their last studio album, Crash of the Crown. So that might have brought any momentum at that point to a halt for a few minutes. It didn't bother me, though, because they made the most ridiculous, brilliant decision I think I've ever seen from a band. Styx did not play Babe. I was so happy. They came out for their encore, and we all kind of looked at each other, my friends and I, and said, well, we know they've got 3 songs left. They've got Mr. Roboto, they've got Babe, and they've got Renegade. So they come out and they play Mr. Roboto. Okay. Great job with that, by the way. And then they go into Renegade. And I'm sitting there thinking, there's no way they're closing the show with a ballad. Nobody closes a show with a ballad. And I'm thinking to myself, dare I hope? Do I hope? Sure enough, they closed out with Renegade, and that was it. No babe. No babe. And I'm so happy. So happy. I wanted to tell all these other people, you should be happy. I'll take Crash of the Crown any day over Babe. So in the end, a great classic rock show. First night of the tour. If you can, if they're playing near you, and I gotta believe they're playing near you somewhere, get tickets. Styx, Foreigner, John Waite, a great show. So now we move on to the new album from Bon Jovi. The album is Forever. 12 tracks. I will try to leave my aforementioned, as we discussed in segment 1, my aforementioned prejudice against Bon Jovi aside. And it drives me crazy because I love them in the 80s. I love them. Slippery and Wet, New Jersey, but this is not the same band. Whether it's because of John Bon Jovi's vocal issues, they just don't rock anymore, and they don't even come close. So Forever, 12 tracks. We will go through it, for better or for worse, track by track. We start off with Legendary, song we have reviewed here in the past on the Fortress of Rock. And if you had a cookie cutter and you had a Bon Jovi song cookie cutter, you could just pound out a generic Bon Jovi hit, that's what you would get with Legendary. There is nothing new here. It's very generic. You can kind of hear the vocal limitations already starting to creep in for John Bon Jovi. And this is the first song where we start to hear references to old school rock and roll. So I don't know if Forever in a way is trying to be a love letter to the history of rock and roll and the history of Bon Jovi. If you look at the whole album that way, maybe you give him a little bit of a break. But of course, Legendary references Brown Eyed Girl, of course, from Van Morrison. And it references Sweet Caroline, of course, the great song from Neil Diamond. Now, I'm going to bring up one of the weaknesses on this album later when I talk about another track, but the final thing I want to point out in a positive way about Legendary is it does have a really good line in terms of the lyrics. It's not overwhelmingly profound, but personally liked it. You don't pick up what you can't lift. I thought that was a very interesting and thought-provoking line to put into a song. So I'll give him credit for that. And he has 2 or 3 other lyric moments like that, lines like that, where I said, hey, not bad. He's actually trying to grow, even at this late stage in his life, in his career, as a songwriter. But that being said, Legendary, not the greatest song. Sorry. And then we move on to track 2, We Made It Look Easy. Now, more vocal limitations are obvious here for John Bon Jovi, but he masks it with a group of female backing singers who sing the chorus. But all that being said, this is a very cool, wistful, very catchy song, even though it's mid-tempo at best. I liked it. And I'm usually the guy that wants the rock. I want the rock. But if you're going to go mellow, if you're going to go slower, I got to tell you, We Made It Look Easy. I'm in so far. So 2 songs in, not doing bad with Forever. And then we get the second single, track 3, Living Proof, which I'm sure will end up being the big hit, the song that everybody remembers off this album. But this is cheating. This is cheating again. Like Legendary was a cookie cutter template for a Bon Jovi song. Living Proof might be a better song, but you're bringing back the talk box. Of course, the talk box is the won't, 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 won't. Most notably on Living on a Prayer. So we bring this back again? That is shameful. That is a shameful, shameful move that kind of destroys an otherwise really good song. And then tracks 4, I have to review track 4 and track 5 together. Because track 4, Waves, and track 5, Seeds, are different. And I like them a lot. These are the 2 songs that really save Forever from being an abysmal album. Now, Waves has got a great chorus. There's like a great hook in there, a bittersweet. He's talking about the imagery in the lyrics, talking about falling under the waves, drowning in the sea, but he's trying to make it a comparison to love, because the woman he loves is waving to him on the shore as he goes down. I think it's great. Well written. This is more of what I wanted to see from John Bon Jovi at this late stage in his career. Some growth, something different. If you're not going to do the Arena Rockers, which I would be all fine with, but he can't do them anymore because his voice is shot, then you give me more of songs like Waves. And then we do get that carrying through to track 5, Seeds. Now, I've admitted over the past couple weeks, month or two, I can never tell if it's actually strings or if it's keyboards masquerading as strings. So that's what you get on Seeds. Again, another very different, very interesting song. But, oh, John, why do you blatantly rip off somebody else? Not only ripping off yourself, and we'll talk more about that in a minute, but the ending of Seeds is directly ripped off from the ending of the Beatles, A Day in the Life. I mean, directly ripped off from A Day in the Life. Listen to the song. You tell me if I'm wrong. I don't think I am. So that's kind of a lame move at the end of Seeds, and otherwise very cool, very interesting, very different song for Bon Jovi. Then, of course, things fall completely apart for the rest of the album. Track 6 is the embarrassing, awful, ugly Kiss the Bride. Down there now, officially, this quickly. Down there with open arms and can't fight this feeling as one of the worst rock ballads of all time. A blatant attempt to write the next great wedding song. Ugh. It is, I'm sorry, vomit inducing, is how bad it is. And this is where I started to think I think Forever is written for his female fans. I think he went into this not even caring if the guys would like this album. Because again, no big arena rock shout outs. You don't have Richie Sambora, so you don't have a ton of guitar. Maybe on a couple songs you get some decent guitar solos, but Kiss the Bride is the low point, and it becomes very hard for the band, for the listener to climb out after that. Because then track 7 is another blatant ripoff, but this time of his own music. You're just digging out of the muck, the mire that is Kiss the Bride, and you get The People's House. And I am telling you, the first 30, 40 seconds are almost an absolute 100% ripoff of Keep the Faith. And that happens to be one of my favorite, if not my favorite, Bon Jovi songs. So The People's House chugs along, doesn't stray too far from the Keep the Faith formula. It's so cheesy. And I absolutely wonder if this will not end up being Joe Biden's campaign song here in 2024 because it is such a cheesy, generic, we've all got to stand together. This is our house. This is the people's house. Yuck. Yuck. Terrible song, and it doesn't get any better once we get to track 8, Walls of Jericho. Now, Walls of Jericho has one of the longest, clunkiest, most awkward sing-along choruses you will ever find. And I told a friend of mine, I said, you want a rock and roll sing-along chorus, it's got to be, 5, 6, 7 words at most? Something like, pour some sugar on me. But Walls of Jericho starts off with this long sing-along chorus that's, I swear to you, 40 words. And we're all supposed to remember all these 40 words in this generic, terrible song. And then tying back to the tease that I gave you with Legendary. Lazy songwriting. You know what you get with lazy songwriting? You get this. Na 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 na. Or in Legendary, you get whoa oh 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 oh. Don't do that. That's lazy songwriting. Don't do that. Nobody likes that. It's lazy, stupid songwriting. You're just trying to fill in gaps because you can't make it a full-fledged song. It has worked, but it has rarely worked in the annals of rock history. And it does not work with Walls of Jericho. So you can tell I am really starting to hate this album. And it doesn't get any better with the last 4 songs. Track 9. I Wrote You a Song. Ugh. We'll just move on. It's a cheesy, mid-tempo, terrible, terrible song. And then track 10, Living in Paradise tries to be one of those big classic arena rockers that Bon Jovi was known for in the 80s. It's barely passable. It's just not anything different, anything really catchy. And then the awkward track 11, My First Guitar. Yes, we get it, John. You're trying to compare your first guitar to a woman. And once again, you make a reference to old school rock and roll. You've referenced Van Morrison. You've referenced Neil Diamond. You've referenced the Beatles. And now you reference Kiss. But the worst part of this cheese fest and how really uncomfortable this song is the first line. Keep in mind again, I understand what he's going for. He's trying to make a comparison to his first guitar and a woman. But you can't start off in this day and age. Honestly, I think it still would have been creepy back in the 70s or the 80s. You can't start off a song with the words, got my hands around her neck. You just can't do it. It doesn't matter if you come back later, even in the next line, and explain, oh, no, it's a metaphor. It's a metaphor. It's still creepy. And then finally, if you weren't already sleeping by now, listening to this album, you get track 12, which is Hollow Man. Hollow Man might be good lyrically, passable lyrically, but it is so god-awful boring musically. You or I could sit around with an acoustic guitar and strum along, sing this song, and probably we'd get the same effect as John Bon Jovi gets with the awful, awful closing song to Forever, Hollow Man. It is just dull, dull, dull. Again, I will give it a marginal pass with the lyrics. The lyrics aren't terrible, but musically it is just so boring. So I wholeheartedly recommend Forever. No, I don't. No, I cannot recommend Forever. This is a letdown. And I think he's making an album for the girls. I think he's making an album for the women. Guys will not listen to this. Guys will not put up with this. And Bon Jovi always walked that fine line back in the 80s where he was able to bring in the men and the women. But he has fallen way far over on the side of the women on this. Probably could say that about most of the music he's put out over the last couple decades. Cannot recommend Forever. I'm sorry. Sorry, guys. Cannot recommend it. I've heard through the grapevine. I've heard from friends of friends. Again, women like it. Think it's one of his best albums. But I will say as a guy, you've got better stuff to listen to than Forever. Cannot recommend this. All right, so we've got a wind up breakdown here. A few minutes left. 2 songs to review. We've given you our concert review. We've given you our album review of the week, and now we've got 2 songs. One new and one new/old. So we'll start off with David Lee Roth. Now, this is only available from what I have seen on YouTube, and that's usually what he does. with the new music that he's been putting out over the last couple years. He'll put it out on YouTube with some bizarre video for a couple weeks, 2-3 weeks, and then he will eventually push it through to streaming. But this one is really interesting because this is one of the most iconic, awesome songs of the 1980s. David Lee Roth doing 867-5309 Jenny. Not bad. Not bad at all. He is very faithful to the original in terms of his vocal stylings. It's a little bit stripped down. You get a harmonica solo substituting for the guitar solo. But otherwise, it's what you would expect from a solid, decent cover of 867-5309. Now, that being said, does it add anything new? No. And that's my one problem with any cover song is that if you're not going to make it different, if you're not going to do anything different to it, change it up. And I know I said they substitute the harmonica for the guitar solo, fine. And it is stripped down a bit, but there's not enough different here with David Lee Roth's version to make me recommend it. I would wholeheartedly say just go back and listen to Tommy Two-Tone's awesome original version. There is no need for a cover song here. And while David Lee Roth does not embarrass himself with this, doesn't add anything new. So, we go from that to Deep Purple. Second single from the upcoming new Deep Purple album Equals One, Pictures of You. Now, it seems to me like Deep Purple is trying to make an album that's more accessible, almost going back to when they kick-started their career again in the 80s with Perfect Strangers. This really feels through two songs. Of course, the first single was Portable Door, which I liked. But now with Pictures of You, this really feels like a Deep Purple final, last gasp effort to connect with a broad audience. Now, I don't think Pictures of You is going to hurt anything. I think Portable Door was a little bit more workable in terms of a bridge between old Deep Purple fans and new rock and roll fans. What few of them there are out there. Pictures of You might be a little bit too poppy, a little bit too 80s pop to really connect. I didn't mind it. Again, not as strong as Portable Door, but Pictures of You doesn't do anything to discourage me from wanting to hear more from the new album Equals One, which of course down the road, probably late July, I think, is when we're going to have our review of Equals One for you here on the Fortress of Rock. So yeah, it's kind of a downer episode here when it comes to reviews. If you can't get tickets to see Styx, Foreigner, and John Waite, that is the one thing here in Breakdown I recommend wholeheartedly to everybody. Get out there and see this triple bill, especially because Foreigner is calling it quits. But Bon Jovi's Forever, no. Stay Away, David Lee Roth, his version of 867-5309, No Great Shakes, Deep Purple's Pictures of You, good, but not great. So there you go. That is Breakdown for you this week here. Episode 148 on June the 14th. It is hot outside. It is freaking hot, and it's just going to get hotter. Heat wave coming. Doc Brown is out in the garage here at the Fortress of Rock, flushing out the coolant in the DeLorean, making sure that we're prepared for next week, but making sure we're prepared for tonight, as we're going to take you into the rock and roll time stream. Segment 3 coming up in just a few seconds after a quick, cheesy music interlude. I Want to Go Back, coming up next. All right, everybody, we're back here on the Fortress of Rock, episode 148, June the 14th, 2024. Doc Brown has got the rock and roll DeLorean up to 1.21 gigawatts. I have to admit, though, June the 14th in the annals, the history of rock and roll, maybe not the most significant date, but we take what we can get. So we move on first to anniversaries. June the 14th, just a couple. On this day, June the 14th, 1994, the great composer Henry Mancini died. And of course, his most beloved, most well-known, in my humble opinion, composition, the indelible earworm known as the theme from the Pink Panther. And then on this day, June the 14th, 1980, Billy Joel's Glass Houses classic album was the number one album in the United States on this date. Second number one album in the U.S. for Mr. Billy Joel. 52nd Street, of course, being the first. Now, before we move on to birthdays, let's take care of some business. First up, I need help. I need sources. I need material in order to give you all this information I give you each and every Friday night. Can't do it all by myself, so there are some main sources I need to give a shout out to. UltimateClassicRock.com, ThisDayInMusic.com, and, of course, the Van Halen Newsdesk.com. And then you have found us somewhere. Very thankful for that. Very thankful for you listening in each and every week. But you have options and you have choices. And those options include Spotify, Pocket Cast, Apple, iHeartRadio, Overcast, Amazon Music, Castbox, and Audible. Now, don't forget to check out the Facebook page for the Fortress of Rock as well. Always have great things going on over the weekend. Tonight, June the 14th, our latest Weekend Rock project. We want to know, what greatest hits compilation do you turn to? Which is the first one you pull out of your record collection, your CD collection, or that you turn to on a streaming service? Is it the Eagles' greatest hits? Last time I checked, the greatest best-selling compilation of all time? Is it a box set? It doesn't have to be your favorite band. For instance, for me, Even though I am a Van Halen fanatic, I would never, ever, ever think about going and turning to Van Halen's Greatest Hits Volume 1. It's just not there for me. I would rather listen to one of their albums, but there are other bands, other performers. My pick was the Guess Who. I think their greatest hits, the best of the Guess Who, is fantastic. Like I alluded to earlier, though, the Eagles, greatest hits, 71 to 75? Kind of hard to beat that one. But it depends on where you go, what your mood is, and what you want to listen to. So you need to tell us on the Facebook page what your go-to greatest hits album is. And once again, doesn't have to be your favorite band. And then, of course, Sunday is New Music Sunday. Each and every Sunday afternoon, I will post a brand new video of a brand new song for you. Now, the video might not be fully produced like it was in the old days, in the 80s on MTV. It might be a visualizer, it might be a lyric video, but the whole point is to get you to listen to new music. That's what we want. Not sure yet what New Music Sunday is going to be yet, but I have a feeling it might involve one Miles Kennedy. All right, we're going to move on to birthdays now here. And I want to go back, of course, our tribute to the late, great Eddie Money. Got a few more birthdays to celebrate than we did with anniversaries. But as I mentioned, don't expect monumental stuff here for June the 14th. Born on this day, June the 14th, 1963, Chris DeGarmo, guitarist from 1982 through 1997, the golden years for Queensryche. And I have to say, it's a shame. I've seen Queensryche twice, but it's been here within the last 6-7 years. It's not the same without Jeff Tate. It's just not the same band. They have gone in a different direction musically. But Chris DeGarmo reminds me of the old school days when Queensryche was really, really cool and really good. Then we move back to June the 14th, 1961. Boy George. Yes. We've got to acknowledge 80s pop, 70s disco, all that good stuff that we all grew up on, that formed our musical tastes and choices. Will I say that I listen to a lot of Culture Club? No. I can honestly say I have guilty pleasures in my CD collection, but I do not own a single song by Culture Club. Sorry. Does that mean I hate them? No. They were fun again. The 80s were fun. You could listen to anything and everything. Karma Chameleon, Do You Really Want to Hurt Me? They weren't terrible songs. Just wasn't my cup of tea. But you cannot deny the impact that Culture Club had, along with Boy George, on 80s rock. And so happy birthday to Boy George, born on this day in 1961. Another big song from the 80s. Now, Culture Club had a ton of them. This band really only had one. Born on this day, June the 14th, 1958, Nick Van Eede, vocalist for Cutting Crew. Now, here's where we separate the men from the boys, the women from the girls. When I say cutting crew, do you know the song that I'm referring to? We'll do a little Jeopardy thing here. Don't. Give you a second or two to figure it out. If you don't have it by now, you'll never get it. The 1987 U.S. #1 song, I Just Died in Your Arms Tonight. So Nick Van Eed, of course, singing vocals on that song for the Cutting Crew. Now we move back to June the 14th, 1949. Legendary drummer, member of Yes, Alan White, born on this day in 1949. Same day, June the 14th, 1949, bass player for Slade, Jim Lee, with the band from 1966 through 1992. Of course, Slade, in their own right, were a very popular band, but thanks to Quiet Riot in the early 80s, went through a resurgence as Quiet Riot took a couple of their songs and turned them into hits. June the 14th, 1945, Rod Argent was born. Now, Rod Argent, very significant piece of rock and roll history for a couple of bands. First, of course, he was with the Zombies and was part of their two big hit songs, She's Not There and Time of the Season. But then when the Zombies broke up the first time, he went on to form his own band called Yes, Argent, and you might remember their big hit song, Hold Your Head Up. Rod Argent, one of those guys that seems like maybe he doesn't get enough credit for his impact in rock and roll history. Born on this day in 1945. And then finally, June the 14th, 1931. Now, he has done a lot of other work. I'm going to focus on one little bit here because it ties into segment 2, our last segment, my review of Foreigner live in concert. But Junior Walker, great saxophone player, born on this day in 1931, played the saxophone solo on Foreigner's massive hit. See how I pulled that off going back to segment 2? Junior Walker played the sax solo on Urgent. So that's going to do it for segment 3. I want to go back over and done, but we are not done yet. We've got one last segment left, and you know we have done a lot to prop this segment up, to keep you around, to keep you listening. Our tribute to the Billboard charts, our top album and our top songs of the week, along with a preview, a sneak peek of what's going to be coming up in the next month here on the Fortress of Rock. Coming up next, after again a quick, cheesy, short musical interlude. Wrap It Up is next, kids. I'll be right back. All right, everybody, we have brought the rock and roll DeLorean back into the garage here at the Fortress of Rock, shutting everything down, pulling up the drawbridge over the moat. But we've still got a few minutes left, a few precious minutes left together here in episode 148 of the Fortress of Rock here on June the 14th, 2024. Let's do things a little differently here. Let's start off with our tribute to the Billboard charts. You guys know I've always said there are certain things growing up that influenced my musical taste greatly. Disco, early 70s rock and roll, late 70s rock and roll, early 80s rock and roll, and Casey Kasem's America's Top 40, which I listen to every Sunday morning. I believe it was 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. Now, the Billboard charts are a disaster right now. They do not reflect, in my opinion, the true taste of America, as they ignore and in that way denigrate rock and roll. So we'll take it into our little humble hands here at the Fortress of Rock, and we'll give you the best rock album and the top rock songs of the week here for the Fortress of Rock. Even though I did not give it a glowing review, and I can pretty much guarantee this is a 1 week only deal, the number one album for the week here on the Fortress of Rock is Forever by Bon Jovi. Now, I have always told you guys since we started this at the beginning of 2024, I will cheat a little bit on songs. You've got 10, 12, 13 songs on an album. So why wouldn't you pick a couple songs every week? You pick one album, you should at least pick 2 songs, right? So again, despite the fact that I did not give Forever by Bon Jovi a great review, and I, in some way, shape, or form, am a little bit of a softie and a sentimental guy. No, I'm not picking Kiss the Bride. Oh my God. No, never. But I will pick one song from Forever by Bon Jovi. The second track, we talked about it earlier. I think it's a very sweet, sentimental song. We Made It Look Easy. Now, sharing the honors with that song from Bon Jovi, the phenomenal, awesome new first single from Miles Kennedy's upcoming brand new album, The Art of Letting Go. We'll have a full review for you next week here on the Fortress of Rock. But it's so good. Ever since it came out a couple days ago. Usually they come out on Friday. All these new songs, the new albums, of course, come out on Friday. But Miles Kennedy snuck this one in a few days early, so I have listened to it at least 8 or 9 times already. I love it. He is one of my current rock and roll gods. Say What You Will by Miles Kennedy shares the honors for top song of the week here on the Fortress of Rock with Bon Jovi, and We Made It Look Easy. So now we move on to what are we going to be talking about in the next month, Maestro? What's on the agenda? Well, for the first time in a long time, outside of next week, things are kind of open-ended. And I'll get into a little more detail here in just a second. But next week is fixed, set in stone. Next week, we will review the new album from Mike Campbell, of course. Mike Campbell, former right-hand man for the late, great Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, of course. We pay tribute to him each and every week in segment 2 with Breakdown. But Mike Campbell, what's he going to do? What's he going to do? He starts up his own band, the Dirty Knobs. This is their third album, just released today, June the 14th. We'll have a full review for you next Friday night for Vagabonds, Virgins, and Misfits. I have the CD in my hot little hand, just delivered a few hours ago from the great and glorious Amazon. That will be your featured album review for episode 149, dropping on June the 21st. Now, normally I would break down the next 3 weeks. Not going to do it. Not going to do it this time, kids. Things are going to be a little bit fluid throughout the rest of June into the beginning of July. I can tell you that next week, in addition to Mike Campbell and the Dirty Knobs, we will have a review of course, Miles Kennedy's Say What You Will, the first single off his upcoming album, The Art of Letting Go. And we will also have our review of the first single off of the new Offspring album, Supercharged, also out October the 11th, along with Miles Kennedy. You would think they'd kind of try to space these things out a little bit. But the first single from Supercharged is Make It All Right. We will have that for you next week. Also, I mentioned how bitter I was in segment 1 about how Def Leppard didn't keep that old school hotline thing going on. The preview for their new song, Just Like 73. So I guess I'm not going to guarantee it for next week, maybe 2 weeks down the road, but Def Leppard featuring Tom Morello, Just Like 73. Hopefully, a new album coming soon. No announcement yet on that. But that song probably 2 weeks out for review here on the Fortress of Rock. Now, once we get past next week in episode 149, we're going to play catch-up. Not mustard, ketchup. Haha. What we're going to do is we're going to try to bring in all the stuff I've been talking about over the last month or so that I just haven't had the time to get into, whether it's Mark Knopfler's 4-song record store day EP, The Boy, the Hold Steady, and of course their A-side, B-side release, Radar and Leda, and of course the Death of the Punchline, video-only song. Still haven't polished it up and set it up for an official release, but the great Roger Clyne. Now, this is solo, kind of, but I'm sure this will come out with him, along with his backing band, the Peacemakers. You Got Lightning. We're still, I promise you, still going to finish up that Bon Jovi Hulu documentary. And I have started. Got a little bit of a preview here, even though officially does not debut until this coming Tuesday. I have got a preview of the PBS 3-part series, Disco, Soundtrack of a Revolution. And because we don't have a lot after next week's episode in terms of new album releases, we'll catch up on all of this for better or for worse. Let's put it that way. You guys already know how I feel about John Bon Jovi. And this long, egomaniacal documentary on Hulu. Hopefully it gets better. And then this disco. I was really looking forward to this disco documentary on PBS, but I should have known that it was on PBS. So that means they're going to turn it into a political agenda. So I'm almost done with episode 1, and I can tell you right now, it's starting to finally turn around and get better, and they're starting to talk about the musical influences that created the beginning, the seeds that started the disco phenomenon. But the first half an hour is painful. It is painful to watch because they just want to make it a political situation. And I'll get more into that once I do the full review. But just keep that in mind. Bear that in mind. That if you're going to watch this, the first half an hour has nothing to do with music. It has everything to do with political agendas, even though it happened in the late 60s and the early 70s, that carry forward into today. And that is my caveat emptor for the PBS Disco series. So that being said, I've given you the rundown. I've given you everything I can in terms of a preview, in terms of giving you a heads up on what will be coming up over the next month. Once we hit mid-July, we're going to have a concert review pretty much every week, because there's not a lot of new music coming out. All the summer releases are out. So it's going to be piecing together these documentaries, these TV shows, trying to find you new stuff that might not actually fit into the category of new music. Maybe we have to go back into some reissues. We'll see how that goes. If we can find another rock and roll documentary to review, maybe the Amy Winehouse movie is out on streaming in a couple weeks. Although I really don't know if that's something I want to watch. We'll make it work. We will make it work. So, that's going to do it for the Fortress of Rock here on June the 14th. I hope you had a good time. I, of course, did. Especially with all the news, all the reviews, reliving great moments from Styx foreigner John Waite, warning you off on Bon Jovi's Forever. But a new week starts in 7 days. We'll do it all over again. I'm the Maestro, Kevin Crane. You are who you are. Love the one you're with. Take care of yourself. Be safe. Happy Father's Day to all the fathers out there. Even though in this day and age it seems like fathers are denigrated everywhere you turn. For all the guys out there, keep your heads up. We need to stick together despite what other factions, what other political agendas might be out there. We need to be strong. And if you don't like me saying that, then tough on you. Love the one you're with. I'm the Maestro, Kevin Crane. We'll talk in 7 days again. Until then, peace out.